Welcome, dear learner. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe so you can enjoy many more stories that will not only inspire you, but also sharpen your English. Now, let's step into a world where one chance meeting changes the course of a young man's life forever. The story begins on a hot summer afternoon in a bustling city. The streets hummed with vendors calling out their prices, cars honking, and the endless rhythm of hurried footsteps. Among this chaos walked a young man named Daniel. At 24, he carried the restless weight of dreams far larger than his wallet. He worked at a printing shop, earning just enough to survive, but never enough to escape. His friends often mocked him, saying, "Daniel, you'll always be stuck there, dreaming about castles while living in a shack." But Daniel refused to believe it. Deep inside, he held a secret hunger, not for luxury, but for freedom. Freedom from counting every coin before buying bread. Freedom from bosses who snapped fingers as if he were invisible. Freedom to live life on his own terms. One evening, while locking up the shop, Daniel noticed a man sitting at the cafe across the street. He was dressed plainly, nothing flashy, no expensive suit, no golden watch. Yet something about him commanded respect. He sipped tea slowly, with a calmness that seemed to push the noise of the world aside. Curiosity pulled Daniel closer. He asked the waiter, "Who is that man? He looks different." The waiter whispered, "That's Mr. Adrian. People say he's wealthy, but not in the usual way. No offices, no factories, no noise. His money works for him while he lives in silence." The phrase struck Daniel like a spark. Money works for him. That night, he couldn't sleep. What did that mean? Could money work while a man rested? Could it grow like a tree, silently, if only one knew how to plant it? His mind spun with questions. The next evening, Daniel gathered his courage and walked into the cafe. "Excuse me, sir," he said nervously. "They say you don't work, yet you are wealthy. How is that possible?" Mr. Adrian studied him for a long moment, his eyes sharp yet kind. Then, with a small smile, he answered, "Sit down, young man. If you're ready to listen, I'll tell you a secret. Wealth is not about working harder. It's about learning the art of making your money work harder than you." And with those words, Daniel's life began to change. Sparkle's language focus. Notice how the phrase "money works for him" is a metaphor. It doesn't mean coins have legs and hands. It means investments bring profit without constant labor. Another key phrase is "restless weight of dreams," showing how Daniel's ambition feels heavy on his shoulders. Verbs like hummed, snapped, commanded bring the city and its people to life. Speech balloon engagement questions for you. 1. Why do you think Daniel was drawn to Mr. Adrian, even though the man looked ordinary? 2. What do you imagine Mr. Adrian means by making money work? 3. Can you retell what Daniel felt when he first saw Mr. Adrian? Using your own words? The first seed, Mr. Adrian did not answer Daniel with promises. He pushed the cafe window open and let the street noise wash in. Hawkers calling, brakes squealing. The heartbeat of a city that never saved a single breath. "Listen," he said, "that is the sound of people trading all their hours for coins. If you learn only this, your life will bend in a new direction. Pay yourself first, then buy workers that don't get tired." He drew 3 circles on a napkin. The pen scratched softly, like a match in the dark. Jar 1. Safety, 3 to 6 months of living. This is your oxygen. Without it, panic sells your future for a discount. He tapped the second circle. Jar 2. Growth. Money you send to work. Broad index funds, simple, boring, steady, or small stakes in businesses you understand. Not stories, not rumors, cash flows. He tapped the third. Jar 3. Freedom. Seeds for experiments, skills that raise your earning power, small side projects, assets that might pay you while you sleep, royalties, rentals, digital tools. Feed these slowly. Let time be the gardener. Daniel stared at the napkin as if it were a treasure map. "But I only have crumbs," he said. "How can crumbs become machines?" Adrian smiled. "Crumbs feed ants. Ants build colonies. 10% of everything you touch goes to jar 2 before rent, before noise, before impulse, even if it's the price of a bus ticket. Your raise is not a miracle. Your raise is discipline." They walked out into late light. The sky was copper, the city a river motion. Adrian led him past a newsstand where old magazines leaned like tired soldiers. Opportunity rarely shouts, he said. It whispers from dusty corners. He pointed at a thin booklet. No one was buying. Local trails and hidden parks. A friend once bought a box of these for nothing when the shop was closing. He photographed each page, turned it into a simple online guide, added a map, sold it for the price of a sandwich. Little trickles became a stream. Not genius, just eyes open. Daniel's chest tightened. The feeling of a door unlocking. So the secret is copies? The secret is ownership, Adrian said gently. Own slices of engines that spin without you. A tiny piece of a market. A tiny rent from a room you rarely use. A guide that sells at midnight. Music you wrote last summer. None of these shout on day one. They whisper for years. Then one morning you wake to a chorus. They reached a quiet square where a fig tree pushed roots under cracked stone. Adrian stopped. Patience, he said, resting a palm on the bark. Everyone loves harvest. Few love seasons. You will be tempted to dig up seeds to check if they're growing. Don't. You will be tempted to chase fireworks. Don't. Choose the orchard over bonfire. A bus sighed to a halt nearby. Students climbed on, laughing, tapping their phones. Daniel watched them with sudden calm, as if the air had cleared. I think I understand the shape, he said. Safety, so fear keeps quiet. Growth, so time has something to feed. Freedom, so I keep my eyes awake. Adrian nodded once. Good. Tomorrow, bring me your numbers. No shame, only truth. A map doesn't judge the traveler, only shows the road. That night, Daniel emptied his pockets on the kitchen table. Receipts, coins, a bent transit card, the tired skeleton of a month. He drew 3 circles on an old bill and wrote figures that hurt to admit. Then he moved a small amount into a new account with a name that made his pulse quicken. Seeds. It was the price of 2 coffees. It felt like a flag on the moon. Language grows with stories too. Notice how present simple carries rules that feel permanent. Opportunity rarely shouts. It whispers. While the past simple paints the scene, he drew 3 circles. They walked out. Metaphors like crumbs feed ants and choose the orchard over the bonfire turn finance into pictures the mind can hold. Idioms such as pay yourself first and wait to a chorus show natural English rhythm and culture. A chorus suggests many small voices becoming strong together. Before the next chapter, reflect aloud. What would your 3 jars look like today? Which jar feels empty? And which one could you fill this week with even a bus ticket amount? Retell Adrian's lesson in your own words of practice. Seed, season, harvest. The patience test. The next morning, Daniel returned to the cafe as promised, carrying a folded sheet of paper that held his messy calculations. He placed it in front of Mr. Adrian with an embarrassed sigh. This is all I have. It looks pitiful. Adrian smoothed the paper gently, as if it were a valuable contract. He scanned the numbers without judgment, then looked up with a steady gaze. Not pitiful, he said. Honest. And honesty is rarer than money. Daniel shifted uneasily in his seat. But how can these scraps ever become freedom? By serving time, Adrian replied. Not the clock on the wall, but the seasons in your life. Money grows like a tree. You cannot shout at it to bloom. You must plant, water, and wait. To prove his point, Adrian led Daniel on a walk through the park. They stopped near a row of small trees, thin and unremarkable. These were planted 5 years ago, Adrian said. For years they looked like sticks. People laugh, call them useless. Yet underground their roots stretch deep. Now look closely. The first buds appear. Soon they'll shade this whole path. Daniel touched one of the fragile branches. The bark was rough, but new life pulsed at the tips. So investments are like this, he murmured. Exactly, Adrian said. The market will test you. Some days it falls, and you'll want to rip your roots from the ground. But patience is the silent partner in wealth. Without it, every tree dies. They sat on a bench, watching children chase pigeons across the square. Adrian drew another sketch in his notebook, a simple curve rising slowly upward. This is compound growth, he explained. At first, it mocks you. The line is flat, progress invisible. Then, after years, it bends sharply upward. That bend rewards those who waited while others quit. Daniel's eyes narrowed. But how do I stay patient when I see friends buying new clothes, new phones, eating at fine places while I put coins into jars? Adrian chuckled softly. Because you are not racing against them. You are racing against time. They will exhaust themselves, chasing each new glitter. You will quietly build an orchard. One day, when they must still trade hours for bread, your trees will feed you without asking. The lesson was clear, but it felt heavy. That evening, Daniel resisted the urge to buy a new jacket he had long desired. Instead, he moved money into his seeds account. The jacket would fade. The seeds, he told himself, would grow. Weeks passed. Daniel followed Adrian's advice strictly. He cut small luxuries, redirected coins into his jars, and invested in a low-cost fund Adrian recommended. Yet, every time he checked the account, the growth was tiny, mere droplets. His patience trembled. One rainy evening, Daniel almost gave up. He stared at the numbers on the screen, convinced nothing was happening. He thought of withdrawing the money to buy something that at least felt real. The next morning, Adrian met him and saw the storm in his eyes. "You want to dig up your seeds, don't you?" he asked. Daniel sighed. "Yes, it feels useless. Too slow." Adrian placed a walnut in Daniel's palm. "Break it open," he said. Daniel cracked it, finding only a small, dry kernel. "This," Adrian explained, "is what people see when they quit too soon. Just a shell. But if you had planted it, years later you would have harvested a tree heavy with fruit. Impatience steals forests and leaves only crumbs." Daniel closed his fist around the walnut shell, a quiet fire kindling inside him. He realized the battle was not against numbers on a screen, but against his own hunger for quick results. From that day forward, he stopped checking his account every morning. Instead, he focused on the discipline of planting. The orchard was still invisible, but he was beginning to understand. Invisible does not mean dead. It only means waiting. The glittering trap. Months slipped by, and Daniel grew steadier. The habit of saving no longer felt like punishment. It was becoming a rhythm, like breathing. His jars were filling, quietly, invisibly. Yet temptation never sleeps for long. One evening, as he walked home from the print shop, Daniel overheard two co-workers talking excitedly outside a lottery booth. A new scheme. "Double your money in 30 days, one said, waving a glossy pamphlet. The other grinned, already clutching a ticket. The word struck Daniel like a spark. Double in 30 days. He lingered near the booth, staring at the bright posters that promised quick fortune. The numbers swirled in his head. If he put even half his savings in, he could leap ahead, skip years of waiting. That night, he carried the thought like a fever. The next morning, unable to resist, he brought it to Adrian. "What if I take a chance?" Daniel asked, sliding the pamphlet across the cafe table. "If it works, I could grow my savings faster than any jar or tree." Adrian did not even glance at the paper. He folded it and set it aside. "You've just met the first wolf in sheep's clothing," he said calmly. "Get-rich-quick schemes. They glitter, but they are hollow. They feed on impatience. But what if it's real?" Daniel pressed. "What if this is my chance?" Adrian leaned closer, his voice like a steady drum. "If it doubles in 30 days, it can vanish in 30 seconds. True wealth grows slow enough to test your patience and strong enough to survive storms. A scheme that promises shortcuts is not a bridge. It is a trap." To drive the lesson deeper, Adrian led Daniel on a small errand. They walked into the old market where vendors shouted and smoke from roasted corn curled through the air. At one corner, a jewelry stall glimmered under the sun. Adrian pointed to two necklaces. One was flashy, bright stones that caught every ray of light. The other was plain gold, simple, steady. "Which do you think sells faster?" he asked. "The shiny one." Daniel answered immediately. "Correct, but which holds value after 10 years. Daniel hesitated, then whispered, "The gold." "Exactly," Adrian said. "Most people chase glitter. Few choose substance. Wealth is built by the few." Daniel flushed with both shame and relief. He realized how close he had come to trading his seeds for glass beads. That evening, he tore the pamphlet in two and threw it away. Still, the temptation left a mark. He began to notice glittering traps everywhere. Friends lured by pyramid schemes, strangers promising profits from secrets, advertisements promising riches overnight. Each time, he remembered Adrian's calm warning. If it doubles in 30 days, it can vanish in 30 seconds. Weeks later, a true opportunity appeared, quieter and less flashy. A friend of Adrian's wanted to rent out a small storage unit at a low rate, but needed a reliable partner to share costs. It will not make you rich overnight, Adrian explained, but people always need safe places for their things. It pays a small, steady income every month. Daniel hesitated. The income looked so small compared to the glittering promises of schemes. But he remembered the walnut in his hand, the trees in the park. He said yes. The first payment was tiny, barely enough to buy groceries for a week. Yet Daniel felt a thrill unlike anything he had known before. For the first time, money entered his pocket without him trading a single hour of labor. It was a whisper, not a shout, but it was real. That night, he wrote in his notebook, "The glitter tempts, but the whisper feeds." Streams into a river. The rent from the storage unit was small, but for Daniel it felt like magic. Each month, the payment arrived whether he worked late or not, whether he was tired or full of energy. It was proof of Adrian's words. Money could indeed work while he rested. Encouraged, Daniel became hungry for more. But Adrian warned him, do not chase streams blindly. Let them flow into the right channels, or they will flood your life with chaos. So Daniel listened, learned, and acted slowly. Over time, he added new streams. A neighbor needed help listing and used furniture online. Daniel offered to manage the sales for a small share. Soon, coins began trickling in. Later, he created a simple guide for printing services, something he knew well, and sold it online for the price of a meal. A few copies sold, then a few more. None of these made him rich, but together they formed a growing rhythm, drops joining into a current. At first, Daniel tried to track everything in his head, but confusion followed. Numbers tangled, streams blurred. One evening, Adrian found him exhausted, surrounded by receipts. "You are learning the second danger," Adrian said. "The river must be managed or it will drown you." He handed Daniel a small notebook with 3 columns. Source, flow, growth. Write every stream here, Adrian instructed. Not just the money, but also the time it takes, the effort it demands. A stream that drains your energy is no true stream. A stream that strengthens itself is the one to keep. Daniel obeyed, and soon patterns appeared. Some streams were noisy but shallow, demanding hours for pennies. Others were quiet but steady, growing without much care. Adrian smiled at his progress. "Now you begin to think like a gardener, not a gambler." Months passed, and Daniel noticed something remarkable. His jars were filling faster. The safety jar gave him peace. He no longer panicked when the shop had slow weeks. The growth jar began to stretch its legs, feeding into solid investments that compounded slowly. And the freedom jar whispered possibilities, experiments that might one day replace the printing shop entirely. But discipline was the true test. One day, flush with pride, Daniel considered spending all his side income on new clothes, perhaps even a small trip. "Haven't I earned it?" he asked himself. When he told Adrian, the older man only raised an eyebrow. "You have earned something, yes. But let me ask, do you want a memory that fades in a week, or an orchard that feeds you for decades?" Daniel lowered his head. He understood. The trip could wait. The orchard must grow. He redirected most of the money into his jars and allowed himself only a modest celebration, a good meal, and a new pair of shoes, nothing more. It felt balanced. Slowly, Daniel's streams gathered strength. He began to sense the shift inside himself. He was no longer desperate, no longer chasing every shiny promise. He had tasted the power of patience and discipline, and it was sweeter than glitter. Late one evening, as he closed his notebook, he whispered to himself, "When streams join, a river begins." and rivers carve valleys through stone. The leap of courage. The months had given Daniel strength, and the small streams of income had taught him patience. Yet every man who learns to plant seeds eventually faces the same question. When will you dare to plant a forest? One evening, Adrian invited Daniel to a quiet rooftop overlooking the city. The streets below glowed with neon lights, the hum of life carrying upward like a restless song. Adrian leaned on the railing and asked, "Tell me, Daniel, how long do you plan to work at the print shop?" Daniel hesitated. "It pays the bills. It's safe." "Safe." Adrian's eyes sharpened. "Safe is a cage with velvet walls. You are fed, but you cannot fly." The word stung. Daniel had always feared the idea of leaving the shop. It was stable, predictable. Yet he also knew it chained him to endless hours of grinding for little reward. That week, a real test appeared. A small building on the edge of town went up for sale. Once a bakery, it stood empty, its windows dusty, its sign broken. But its location was good, near a growing neighborhood. Adrian brought Daniel to see it. "This is your chance," Adrian said. "A property that can be rented month after month. A larger stream, one that will not dry quickly, but it requires courage. You must put a heavy share of your savings into it. Are you ready?" Daniel's stomach twisted. The price was terrifying. To buy it, he would need to drain much of his carefully built jars. "What if I lose it all?" he whispered. Adrian bent down, picked up a pebble, and tossed it onto the sidewalk. "What if you never throw? Then the pebble stays forever in your hand. Safe, but useless. Wealth requires risk, but not blind risk. You have your safety jar. You have your streams. Even if this fails, you will not drown. The true danger is letting fear chain you crumbs when orchards wait." That night, Daniel could not sleep. He paced his small room, weighing every possibility. His mind screamed with images of failure, empty rooms, lost savings, shame. But another voice whispered, "What if it works? What if the orchard truly begins here?" Finally, at dawn, he made his decision. His hands shook as he signed the papers. But when it was done, a strange calm filled him. For the first time, he owned something that could earn without his presence. Something solid, something real. The first months were not easy. Repairs drained his energy and money. Broken pipes, peeling paint, endless permits. More than once, Daniel nearly surrendered, convinced he had made a mistake. But Adrian reminded him, every forest begins with sweat. Endure the storm, and shade will come. Soon, the building came alive again. A small cafe rented the ground floor. Above it, 2 rooms filled with tenants. And just like that, Daniel's river deepened. The income was steady, larger than any stream before. Standing outside the revived building one evening, Daniel felt tears burn his eyes. The dusty shell had become a living source of wealth, not through gambling, not through glitter, but through courage. In his notebook, he wrote, "Fear tests the gate. Courage opens it." The weight of freedom. With the building now rented, Daniel felt a new rhythm in his life. Each month, money arrived without his sweat staining the pages of the print shop. It was steady, solid, like the heartbeat of a river. For the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. But freedom, Adrian warned, is not just a gift, it is a test. One evening, Daniel sat at the cafe table with a wide smile. "I could quit the shop now," he said. "The rent from the building covers my basic needs. I could live without clocking in every day." Adrian studied him with calm eyes. "Yes, you could. But tell me, Daniel, would you be free or would you be idle?" Daniel frowned. "Isn't freedom the right to rest?" Adrian shook his head slowly. "Rest is sweet after labor, but rot begins when labor dies completely. Wealth is not only to free you from work, it is to free you for greater work. The orchard feeds a farmer, but it also demands pruning, guarding, planting anew. If you ignore it, weeds will choke it and storms will strip it." Daniel absorbed the words, but did not fully understand until weeks later. The tenants in his building began to complain. A leaky pipe, a noisy neighbor, an insect problem. At first, Daniel brushed him off, telling himself he had already earned the right to relax. But neglect bred dissatisfaction. One tenant threatened to leave. The danger struck him like cold water. Wealth left untended could vanish as quickly as it came. He rushed to repair the problems, learning how to manage not only money, but also people. He hired help, kept records, built trust. The building, once a passive stream, became a responsibility, a living system that demanded respect. Now you begin to understand. Adrian said when Daniel shared his struggle, freedom is not escape. It is stewardship. The money works for you, yes, but you must guide it, shape it, watch over it. Otherwise, it runs wild like an untamed river. Slowly, Daniel grew into this new role. He balanced discipline with joy, responsibility with reward. He reinvested his profits, repaired what broke, and began to save for another property. He no longer felt like a boy chasing glitter, but like a man building quietly, brick by brick. One night, standing on the rooftop of his first building, Daniel looked over the glowing city. He realized something profound. True wealth was not the absence of work. It was a power to choose meaningful work. He could say no to drudgery, yes to projects that inspired him, yes to opportunities that built not only his fortune, but also his character. In his notebook, he wrote, "Freedom is not the end of work. It is the right to work on what matters." The final lesson. Years passed, and Daniel's orchard of income grew wider. The storage unit, the furniture sales, the online guides, the building with its tenants, all whispered together, forming a chorus of streams that had become a river. He was no longer the boy counting coins in a dim print shop. He was a man with choices, a man who had learned to plant, to wait, and to reap. Yet Adrian, now older and slower in his steps, told him one evening, "You have learned patience, discipline, and courage, but there is one lesson left, the hardest of all." They sat beneath the same fig tree where their first conversation about seeds had taken place. The night air was cool, the city glowing faintly in the distance. Daniel leaned forward. "What lesson is that?" Adrian smiled faintly. "The art of giving." Daniel was puzzled. "But I worked so hard to build this. Why should I give it away?" "Because money is like water," Adrian explained. "If it flows only inward, it grows stagnant. When it flows outward as well, it becomes a living river, refreshing, renewing, respected. Wealth is not measured by what you keep locked in your jars, but by the lives touched by what flows from them." Daniel wrestled with the thought. For so long, his focus had been survival, then growth, then freedom. Giving felt like weakening his orchard, yet Adrian's eyes were steady. "You fear losing what you have. But consider this. The farmer who eats all his fruit has no seeds for tomorrow. The farmer who shares his fruit plants forests in other fields. Which farmer lives longer in memory?" Weeks later, Daniel faced the test. A fire swept through part of the neighborhood near his building, leaving several families without homes. Daniel stood among the ashes. His tenants gathered around him, frightened and uncertain. He could have simply collected his rent as usual and left them to fend for themselves. Instead, he remembered Adrian's words. He opened the doors of his property, offering rooms at reduced rent, even free for those who had lost everything. He organized repairs, gave work to local craftsmen, and used part of his profits to restore what the fire had taken. It cost him more than he liked, but what it gave him was beyond price. The neighborhood grew loyal to him. Tenants stayed longer. Businesses thrived near his building, and his reputation became that of a man who built not only wealth but trust. Months later, as the fig tree dropped its leaves, Adrian smiled at him proudly. "Now, Daniel, you understand the art of money. It is not gold, it is not glitter. It is seeds, seasons, rivers, and orchards. It is patience when others panic, courage when others tremble, discipline when others waste, and generosity when others clutch. Wealth is not the end of the journey. It is the tool to build journeys worth living." Daniel looked back on his path. The restless nights, the glittering traps avoided, the first trembling steps into ownership, the river of streams, and finally, the giving that turned his orchard into a forest. He felt no pride in riches, only gratitude for the wisdom that had shaped him. That evening, he wrote his last note in the old notebook. True wealth is not measured by coins or buildings. It is measured by freedom, purpose, and the lives your river waters. And for the first time, Daniel felt fully free, not because he had gained, but because he had learned when to give. And so, dear listener, Daniel's journey reminds us that money is not magic but patient art, an art of planting seeds, waiting for seasons, turning streams into rivers, and sharing harvests so that forests may grow. Thank you so much for staying with this story until the end. If it inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share with friends who also dream of freedom. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What would you do if you had a stream of passive income flowing into your life every month? Write your answer in the comments. I can't wait to read your thoughts. Stay motivated, keep learning, and remember, patience and purpose make the richest orchard of all.